Have you ever wondered what truly goes through a man's soul in that moment of profound connection, when bodies unite and masks fall away? That instant where time stands still and something more primitive than words takes over. You're about to discover a truth that will forever change the way you understand masculine intimacy. It's not just bodies meeting in the dark, but souls confronting their own abysses. Jung knew it. The moment a man enters a woman, he crosses a threshold where the persona meets the shadow, and love only begins if he dares to stay. That collision between the visible and the hidden, between what he shows the world and what he hides even from himself. Prepare for a journey into the heart of the masculine, to those secrets he'll never confess, but that determine every aspect of his connection with you. If this has already sent a shiver down your spine, like this now, because what I'm about to reveal could transform how you love and are loved. Let's begin this journey together. The first thing a man experiences upon entering a woman is a devastating wave of power mixed with a profound current of vulnerability. It's as if two opposing rivers flow through him simultaneously, pulling him in contradictory directions that both tear him apart and complete him. On one hand, he feels the primordial confirmation of his masculinity. He has been chosen, accepted. A woman has opened not only her body, but her trust to him. This moment touches something ancestral within his being. The archetypal masculine impulse to conquer, to demonstrate potency, to present himself as the giver of life and pleasure. It's an echo that resonates from caves to modern skyscrapers. Here is the proof that he is a man. But simultaneously, this same instant renders him fragile, exposed, fearful. Will he measure up? Can he satisfy what she truly craves? This paradox confuses many women. They see the outward confidence, the physical drive, the masculine strength on display. But then, almost immediately, they notice something else. A hesitation in his eyes, a sudden silence afterward, or a need for validation rarely expressed in words. The hidden question that gnaws at him is, am I enough? Did I satisfy her? Will she still want me tomorrow? These are not childish doubts. They are the secret shadows men rarely confess, even to themselves. Jungian psychology helps us understand why this happens. The persona, that mask of security he shows the world, collides violently with the shadow, the hidden fear of inadequacy and rejection. In that instant, his archetypes awaken like ancient beasts emerging from the ocean. The lover archetype feels triumphant and alive, proud to be desired. The child archetype trembles, longing for comfort and security. The warrior archetype insists on maintaining control, on demonstrating strength even if he feels insecure inside. This internal conflict is what makes intimacy with men so complex and at times baffling. For some men, that fear of not being enough masquerades as bravado. They exaggerate their performance, act dominant, or even boast afterward. This isn't pure arrogance, it's armor. They are trying to silence that small inner voice that whispers, "What if I disappointed her?" For other men, the experience opens the door to genuine vulnerability. They soften. They look into your eyes more deeply. They long for a closeness that goes beyond the physical act. This is the man who risks being fully seen, and because of it, can become a more connected lover. Women often wonder, why does he sometimes seem distant after intimacy? Or, why does he suddenly hold me tighter? The answer lies in this dance between power and vulnerability. If his shadow of fear dominates him, he may withdraw, needing space to rebuild his mask of confidence. If he feels safe in your presence, he may draw closer, seeking the refuge that allows him to integrate his vulnerability instead of hiding it. Jung taught that what we resist persists. If a man resists his feelings of fragility, these often return as projection. He might accuse you of judging him or complain that you are hard to please, when in reality it is his own inner critic tormenting him. But if he accepts both pride and fear, both power and tenderness, he moves one step closer to individuation, towards being whole and authentic in love. For women, understanding this first layer is essential. Many believe men seek only physical release in intimacy, but the truth is, he also seeks validation of his worth, not just through words of praise, but through the feeling that you accept both his strength and his fragility. If you ignore his vulnerability, he may emotionally disconnect. If you demand constant proof of his power, he may crumble under the weight of expectation. But if you see that his masculinity includes strength and fear, pride and doubt, You create space for an intimacy that is both passionate and emotionally safe. This is why this first layer of intimacy is so crucial to deeply understanding the masculine soul. A man feels proud to have been chosen, but also fragile because he fears falling short. This contradiction is not a flaw in his design. It is the very essence of his humanity. In that moment of union, it is not just one body meeting another. It is a complete being, with all his contradictions and complexities, offering himself to the abyss of connection, hoping not to be destroyed in the process. If the first layer is power mixed with vulnerability, the second is validation. For many men, the act of entering a woman is unconsciously experienced as a test of worth. This confirms that they are desirable, chosen, and adequate. This moment can seem like tangible evidence that they belong, that they matter, that their masculinity has been affirmed in a way the world rarely offers. However, herein lies the paradox Jung would immediately point out. If validation is linked solely to the act itself, it never truly satisfies. It is a bottomless well that cannot be filled from the outside. In these intimate moments, a man often doesn't pay as much attention to his own performance as to his partner's responses. The rhythm of your breath, the sound of your surrender, the look in your eyes, these become silent markers of whether he has been enough. When your body relaxes, when your eyes soften under his touch, he feels affirmed in his deepest self. But when you seem distant, distracted, or impassive, he can spiral inward, doubting himself, fearing he has failed some invisible test he didn't even know he was taking. Jungian psychology reveals that much of masculine desire is not a conscious choice, but an unconscious pull. Shaped by archetypes, a man often seeks external validation because he internally battles the shadow of inadequacy. The lover craves affirmation. The hero wants victory while the shadow whispers, "You are not enough." The partner's response then becomes more than pleasure. It transforms into a mirror, reflecting both his pride and his doubt. Herein lies the essential debate about masculine intimacy. Some view a man's desire as purely biological, but Jung argued that biology fails to explain this profound hunger for validation. In intimate moments, a man's internal conflicts surface like bubbles in boiling water. Is he a conqueror or a child longing for praise? Confident or secretly begging for reassurance? If he seeks validation solely through sex, he risks falling into an endless cycle, chasing partner after partner, not out of pure desire, but out of a need to keep proving himself. Each encounter answers, "Am I worthy?" only briefly before fear returns like the tide. As Jung warned, what remains unconscious will govern us as fate. Until a man confronts his shadow of inadequacy, no number of encounters will silence it. For women, this can lead to confusion and even pain. You might wonder why he sometimes seems obsessed with your reactions, why he searches for signs that you are moved, or why he distances himself if you remain quiet. The truth is, in those moments he is not just seeking pleasure, he is seeking evidence that he is enough. Your breath, your gaze, your sounds, these become the proof he unconsciously yearns for. But herein lies the fundamental challenge. You are not responsible for healing the shadow within him. You cannot carry the weight of his self-esteem on your shoulders. What you can do is recognize the dynamic, respond authentically, and choose whether his search for validation is based on genuine connection or an endless hunger you can never fully satisfy. The Jungian insight here is liberating. Validation is natural, but when it becomes the sole objective, it enslaves both lovers in a prison of expectations. True intimacy is not about performing as proof, but about allowing vulnerability to be met with genuine acceptance. When a man begins to integrate his shadow, to accept that he is strong and uncertain simultaneously, he no longer needs every moment of union to declare his worth. He can rest in the connection instead of desperately pursuing confirmation. This second layer then teaches us a profound truth. Intimacy becomes dangerous when it is reduced to a test of worth, an exam that must be passed to deserve love. But when it transforms into an encounter of two souls, where validation naturally arises from genuine presence, it can transform both lovers into more complete versions of themselves. Have you noticed how much a man seems to seek your reactions during intimacy? And have you wondered if he is truly seeking pleasure or proof that he is enough? This is the duality that resides at the center of the masculine experience, the warrior and the child coexisting in the same body, at the same moment, seeking both conquest and solace in your arms. When you understand that for him, every intimate encounter is also an encounter with his own worth, you can choose how to respond, not from the obligation to constantly validate him, but from the freedom to see his complete humanity. And in that understanding gaze, both can find something deeper than momentary validation, a mutual recognition that worth is not proven in bed, but discovered in the complete acceptance of who we truly are. From the earliest stories of humankind, men have been described as wanderers and returners. Ancient myths frequently portray man as a hunter who roams the world, but repeatedly returns to the same home, the same woman, the same familiar embrace. In Greek epics, warriors fought for glory in distant lands, yet longed for the arms of Penelope or Andromache. In tribal cultures, initiation rites emphasized separation from women, but equally celebrated reunion, seeing it as the renewal of life. These patterns suggest that, although men may appear restless, something deeper draws them back to a particular bond. Modern science gives us a clearer idea why. During physical intimacy, the male body releases oxytocin and dopamine, the same chemicals that bond mothers to infants and shape the memory of comfort. These neurochemical changes blur the walls between desire and emotion. They create what feels like a merger, the sense that for a moment his boundaries dissolve and he belongs completely to another being. Even if a man logically convinces himself that the encounter is casual, his nervous system remembers the body, the scent, the rhythms of the woman he has penetrated. That memory is not just in the mind, but written into his biology, etched into every cell like an ancestral remembrance. Carl Jung would take this further, transcending biology into psychology and symbolism. For Jung, intimacy is a symbolic fusion of opposites, masculine and feminine, conscious and unconscious, persona and shadow. He believed that the union carries a mythic weight because it represents the psyche's longing to return to wholeness. The man in these moments may not realize it, but he is enacting an archetypal script. He is not simply touching a woman. He is encountering his anima, the feminine part of his soul-seeking integration. This is why the bond can feel overwhelming, why he can feel both expansion and loss of control. Herein lies one of the most debated points of Jungian thought. Some critics argue that intimacy is simply chemistry and instinct, a matter of hormones and evolution. Jung insisted that biology alone cannot explain the depth of attachment, nor how a single experience can leave a man obsessed for years. He pointed towards the collective unconscious, where the archetypes of union and longing reside. In his view, a man's return to a woman is not just due to oxytocin, but because she has awakened something in his unconscious, a memory of his own incompleteness and the promise of wholeness through her. For many women, this helps explain why a man might continue to return even when logic dictates he shouldn't. He may not be calculating. He may not even understand what is happening. His body has remembered her. His unconscious has imprinted her as the bearer of his anima, as the mirror of his own soul. This can create deep attachment, sometimes even obsession. What seems like a simple connection on the surface is, in Jungian terms, a powerful psychic bond drawing him towards the reflection of his own soul. But there are unavoidable risks in this chemical and spiritual fusion. If a man mistakes this bond for possession, he can become controlling, demanding constant access to maintain the illusion of wholeness he has experienced. If he denies the bond, pretending attachment doesn't exist, he can scatter himself across multiple encounters, never understanding why the ghost of one woman persists in his most intimate thoughts. Jung would warn that until a man confronts the symbolic meaning of this fusion, he will remain trapped, obsessed with clinging or restless in search of what he has already lost but cannot name. For women, understanding this third layer offers revealing clarity. If he continues to return, it may not be strategy or manipulation, but the simple fact that his nervous system and unconscious have bonded with you in ways that transcend rational thought. You are not responsible for his inner journey, but knowing this truth allows you to step back with wisdom. You can choose whether the bond becomes fertile ground for mutual growth or whether it ensnares both of you in cycles of obsession and dependency that limit rather than liberate. This chemical and psychic bond explains why intimacy is never just sex for a man, even if he insists it is. His body and unconscious know a deeper truth than his conscious mind, that each union is also a dissolution of boundaries, a moment where his individual self merges with something larger than himself. As a woman, you may feel this shift in him after intimacy. The way he looks at you may transform. His touch might become more possessive or more tender. He may seek reassurance or distance. All these are signs of walls dissolving, defenses falling, of chemistry and the unconscious doing their ancient, powerful work. The question is not whether this bond occurs. It occurs inevitably, with or without his conscious permission. The question is how both of you will navigate its consequences, how you will honor the connection that has formed without allowing it to consume or limit your individual growth. A middle-aged man shared in therapy. I thought it would be casual. I said I could leave without a trace, but the moment I was with her, something opened inside me. Afterward, I kept thinking, what if she forgets me? What if I was just a passing figure in her life? I was afraid, and at the same time I realized I cared far more than I ever intended. His confession reveals a reality many men never admit aloud. Intimacy awakens not only desire, but also a struggle between fear and love. Superficially, men often insist they can separate physical proximity from emotional attachment. They claim they can keep it casual, treat intimacy as an experience without deeper consequences. However, Jung would warn us that the unconscious does not obey rational logic. Intimacy is never merely physical. It is also a psychic portal. A man may enter believing he is in control, but quickly discovers that intimacy bypasses his carefully constructed defenses. What emerges is not simply pleasure, but love, unexpected and overwhelming like a tsunami, striking without prior warning. Fear usually arises first, like an ancestral protection mechanism. There is the fear of failure, the worry that he didn't satisfy her or prove himself. There is the fear of being forgettable, the terrifying thought that she might emerge unscathed while he remains consumed by the memory. There is the fear of comparison, the suspicion that she silently compares him to other men and finds him inferior. Jung would describe these fears as the whispers of the shadow, that part of the psyche carrying doubt, inadequacy, and shame. Intimacy shines an unforgiving light into this dark chamber, forcing him to confront what he would prefer to keep hidden in the depths of his being. Yet, even as fear persists, love silently steps onto the stage like an unexpected intruder. Jung spoke of the anima, the inner feminine present in every man, which comes alive when intimacy is shared. The woman before him ceases to be just a partner. She becomes the mirror of his soul, the external embodiment of his inner anima. This is why men who swear they want nothing serious often find themselves unexpectedly entangled in deep connections. The anima doesn't respond to logic or prior agreements. It responds to resonance, to that silent recognition of something familiar in the unknown. And when it is awakened, the bond becomes undeniable, inescapable. This creates a paradoxical internal battlefield. The rational mind insists on keeping intimacy light and safe, but the unconscious speaks an entirely different truth. Here is love. Here is the bond. Here is the reflection of your deepest longing. Intimacy dissolves the walls he has built for years, exposing a tenderness he may not even know exists. He can resist, but he cannot completely escape this reality. For women, this helps explain behaviors that seem contradictory and puzzling. One day he withdraws, avoiding calls and pretending nothing has changed. The next, he returns, clinging tighter than before. This is not hypocrisy or calculated manipulation. It is the push and pull between shadow and anima, between the fear of being consumed and the love that refuses to remain hidden. The cost of ignoring this paradoxical internal conflict can be devastating. A man who denies the love awakened in intimacy may harden, treating closeness as a test of pride rather than a space for connection. This often creates confusion and pain, leaving both lovers wounded in ways they don't fully understand. But a man who admits his fear and yet leans into love begins the process Jung called individuation. He learns to integrate the shadow with consciousness, strength with tenderness. In doing so, he becomes capable not only of desiring, but of surrendering to authentic devotion. Jung reminded us that as long as men do not confront this paradoxical internal conflict, they will remain prisoners of it. Fear convinces them to hide. Love threatens to expose them. Both forces pull in opposite directions, tearing the soul apart. However, when they accept that fear and love always arrive together as inseparable companions, intimacy transforms. It no longer becomes a test of masculinity, but a path towards wholeness. For women, understanding this can create compassion where there was once frustration. When a man withdraws after intimacy, it may not signal emotional emptiness or disinterest. More frequently, it means there was too much stirring within him. Fear and love collided, leaving him disoriented like a sailor without a compass. Recognizing this truth does not justify neglect or erratic behavior, but it helps to see the humanity behind his contradictions. He is not simply divided between leaving and staying. He is divided between fleeing from love and surrendering to it completely. Do you think intimacy awakens love more often than men admit? And how might this change the way you understand his contradictions afterward? The answer to these questions could transform not only your understanding of men, but also how you navigate the labyrinth of desire and connection in your own life. Throughout history, the meaning of intimacy for men has dramatically shifted, transforming with the ages like a river changing its course. In ancient societies, masculinity was often associated with conquest and lineage. A man's worth was measured by his ability to produce heirs or demonstrate dominance over others. Intimacy, in this context, was framed as a duty, a transaction between power and survival. The emotional dimension was rarely mentioned, and vulnerability often remained buried under rigid, unforgiving cultural expectations. In contrast, the modern man inhabits a much more complex and fragile web of identity. Intimacy is no longer merely about survival or status. It has become deeply intertwined with his self-perception, with the image he holds of himself as a man and as a human being. How he is received by a woman after the intimate act can confirm or destabilize how he sees himself on levels he doesn't even fully comprehend. In Jungian terms, intimacy touches the persona, that mask he presents to the world, and tests if it aligns with the deeper self residing behind the defenses. A man may enter believing he is confident, capable, strong, but afterward find himself questioning, was I truly present? Did she see me as I wished to be seen? Did she recognize my true self beneath my actions? It is here that presence acquires transcendental importance. Jung frequently emphasized the importance of mindfulness, of being fully attentive to the present moment without the distractions of past or future. When a man is truly present during intimacy, he experiences not only union with the other, but also a clearer reflection of himself, like gazing into a crystal-clear water mirror after a lifetime of seeing only distorted reflections. However, this presence is fragile, like fine crystal. It can be nurtured or destroyed by a woman's most subtle cues after the intimate encounter. A touch of gratitude, a gentle embrace, or simply remaining close can affirm his identity, telling him without words that he is not only desired but accepted in his totality. On the other hand, indifference, distance, or coldness can wound him deeply, awakening the shadow of inadequacy and rejection that many men carry from childhood. This duality explains why intimacy is never neutral in its effects. It either heals or wounds. The same man can leave the same encounter more integrated or more fragmented depending on how he experiences his partner's presence afterward. Jung would describe this as the meeting of archetypes. When the woman responds with warmth, she embodies the nurturing side of the anima, helping him integrate vulnerability into his sense of identity. When she responds with rejection, she awakens the shadow, leaving him trapped in doubt and shame. The conflict between past and present becomes clear here, like lines drawn in wet sand. In earlier eras, a man could ignore these internal tremors, dismissing them as weakness unbecoming of his gender. Culture reinforced stoicism, telling him intimacy was about performance and duty, not about feeling. But the modern man, shaped by changing expectations, cannot easily separate identity from emotion. He may laugh it off, he may deny it externally, but internally, he knows the truth. How she responded changes how he sees himself. This tension creates both risks and opportunities for both lovers. If he constructs his identity solely based on her reactions, he risks emotional dependency, always seeking external reassurance to validate his inner self. If he completely ignores her presence, he risks becoming distant, using intimacy as an empty act rather than a transformative experience. Jung's teachings offer a middle path through this emotional labyrinth. Individuation means holding both truths simultaneously, recognizing the impact of the other's presence while grounding identity in one's own inner wholeness. It is the delicate dance between connection and autonomy. between vulnerability and strength. For women, this layer reveals how much influence they hold in their hands like precious water. A small act afterward, a word of gratitude or even a silence laden with meaning, carries weight far beyond the present moment. It can solidify his confidence or shatter it like fine porcelain against hard stone. This does not mean a woman is responsible for a man's self-esteem. That burden would be unsustainable and unfair, but it means her presence deeply matters in ways that transcend the physical. Intimacy doesn't end when bodies separate. It lingers in the psyche as an echo, shaping how he sees himself and how he perceives the relationship at its deepest foundations. The fifth layer teaches us that intimacy is never casual at a soul level. It reshapes identity, it reconfigures presence, and in that reshaping, a man either moves closer to his authentic self or retreats deeper into the shadows of inauthenticity and disconnection. Jung would remind us that this is the final task, to accept the mirror that intimacy provides, to confront both pride and doubt, and to allow presence, not performance, to define the meaning of love in its many dimensions. Only then can a man remain present, not only with his lover, but also with himself in life's most vulnerable moments. We have journeyed through 5 hidden layers of the masculine psyche during intimacy. For a man, the act is not merely physical, but a mirror in which he confronts his shadow, his anima, and his deepest longings. Jung reminded us that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Intimacy is one of the clearest places where this truth comes alive with an intensity that can be terrifying. The path toward wholeness begins by recognizing fragmentation. Most men have been conditioned to compartmentalize their experience. Desire separate from love, power separate from vulnerability, conquest separate from surrender. This compartmentalization creates an illusion of control, but it also generates a profound existential loneliness. How can a fragmented being experience true connection? He can only offer fragments of himself, never his totality. The central paradox every man faces is that he longs to be fully seen while simultaneously fearing that very visibility. He wants a woman to recognize his strength and his fragility simultaneously, to accept both his light and his darkness. Yet, he has been conditioned to believe that showing any vulnerability is to risk rejection, loss of respect, or, worse, indifference. This tension between longing and fear is the battlefield where the struggle for masculine integrity is waged. As Jung explained, the process of individuation, the path toward wholeness, requires confronting and embracing the opposites within oneself. The warrior must recognize the child. The conqueror must accept the seeker of solace. The protector must admit his need for protection. During intimacy, these opposites emerge with an almost painful clarity. A man can feel simultaneously powerful and exposed, triumphant and fearful. This experience of duality can be so overwhelming that many men flee from it, either by physically withdrawing after the act or by emotionally disconnecting during it. But those who dare to remain present before this duality discover something transformative. Intimacy can become a portal towards psychic integration. When a man allows his partner to witness both his strength and his need, both his capacity to give and his hunger to receive, he begins to heal the artificial division within himself. This is the true meaning of masculine vulnerability. It is not weakness, but integration. It is not surrender, but expansion. A man who can display his totality during intimacy no longer needs to constantly defend against parts of himself. He no longer needs to project his fears onto his partner. He no longer needs to use sexuality as a test of worth or as an escape from emotional connection. For women, understanding this masculine journey toward wholeness offers a radically different perspective on intimacy. What might be interpreted as inconsistency or manipulation is often the result of this internal struggle. When a man displays excessive dominance and then surprising vulnerability, he is not being contradictory. He is oscillating between aspects of himself he has not yet fully integrated. Integration requires presence and patience. Jung emphasized that the path toward wholeness is not linear but spiral. There are moments of profound connection followed by periods of withdrawal. There are significant advances followed by relapses into old patterns. This rhythm does not indicate failure, but the natural process of psychic transformation. Intimacy can accelerate this process because it simultaneously activates multiple levels of the psyche. The body, with its chemical and neurological responses, intertwines with the mind and its narratives about identity and worth. The spirit, with its longing for transcendence and meaning, meets instinct and its primal urges. In no other human context do so many levels of experience converge with such intensity. For a man on the path toward wholeness, each intimate encounter becomes an opportunity for self-knowledge. He learns not only about his partner but about himself, how he responds to pleasure and vulnerability, how he handles closeness and separation, how he integrates desire and respect. The bed becomes a laboratory of consciousness where social masks fade and psychological truth emerges. Women who understand this dimension of masculine experience can consciously participate in this process, not as therapists or saviors, roles that would create imbalance, but as compassionate witnesses to a human journey that in many ways mirrors their own path toward integration. When a woman receives the totality of a man without judging him for his contradictions, she offers him the most precious gift, a space where he can be authentically imperfect, where he can display both his mastery and his wounds, both his capacity to give pleasure and his need for solace. This space of total acceptance becomes fertile ground where both can grow toward wholeness. The sexual act then transcends the physical to become a communion of souls seeking mutual recognition. What began as desire culminates in something deeper, an experience of belonging not only to the other, but to oneself. Jung would call this the union of opposites, the conjunctio oppositorum, which represents the ultimate goal of the alchemical process of personal transformation. For the modern man, divided between contradictory expectations and confusing cultural messages about masculinity, this type of integrated intimacy can be revolutionary. It allows him to exist beyond the limiting categories of alpha male or new man, to inhabit a more authentic space where his complete humanity can be expressed and recognized. The final paradox is beautiful. By allowing himself to be fully seen in his vulnerability and power, a man discovers a deeper strength than he ever knew while trying to project invulnerability. By surrendering to true intimacy, he finds not loss, but expansion, not weakness, but authenticity, not control, but freedom. You have journeyed through the depths of the masculine soul, that territory where few dare to venture with brutal honesty. Now you understand that when a man enters you, it is not just a body seeking pleasure, but a complete being confronting his own abysses. That instant of physical union is also a scalpel that opens the protective layers he has built throughout his life. What you see afterward, his silence, his sudden tenderness, his distance, are echoes of an internal battle he cannot name, but which determines how he will love or fear you. If you have felt that strange contradiction in his gaze, that moment where he seems simultaneously powerful and lost, you have glimpsed the true nature of the masculine, an eternal pendulum between power and vulnerability, between fear and total surrender. Those who ignore these truths are doomed to relate only to ghosts, to projections, never to the real man who resides behind the masks. The next time you feel that moment of union, remember, you are holding not only his body, but his naked soul in your hands. Comment, I see him whole, if you have understood the depth of what occurs when bodies meet and souls recognize each other.